For 3 days, France has been gripped by an unfolding drama of unprecedented violence. The terror that was unleashed as that first burst of gunfire ripped through the Charlie Hebdo office on a quiet Wednesday morning in Paris has sent shockwaves through Europe, triggering agonized debate about freedom of speech and liberty, that keystone of the French state.
We're also getting explosions now.
People who kills the monster.
The human race cannot be stopped by hatred.
Parisians decided to gather and to shout on the Place de la République, "We are not afraid."
An attack in broad daylight in the heart of Paris. Two heavily armed gunmen making their escape. They've already killed and are about to add more victims to their slaughter. This police officer lying on the ground has been shot and injured, approaching in combat mode before shooting him again at point-blank range. Gloating about the bloodshed as they calmly make their getaway.
What I saw was the end of the shooting, people trying to escape, and policemen arriving on the scene very quickly. And unfortunately for one of them, he tried to fight and he tried to run towards the gunman, and he was shot. He was shot down in cold blood.
The gunman left behind a scene of unimaginable horror. Paramedics and police officers descending on the site of the attack were confronted with the aftermath of a bloodbath. The wounded, some critically, poured out onto the streets seeking help. Inside the building, their dead colleagues. Journalists and illustrators of the magazine Charlie Hebdo.
We saw a lot of bodies that were already on the ground. Some of them looked clearly dead, so there was nothing much we could do, so we did that, and then we waited for the rescue teams to come in, and within minutes the place was completely packed with the police, the emergency teams, and so on and so forth. So we just, at some point, an authoritative voice rose from the crowd, and they said, well, look, everybody is still alive, leave the room. And so we just left, and then we were sort of outside in our own office.
Among those killed, Stéphane Charbonnier, editor of the weekly publication. He'd received threats before, but defended cartoons featuring the Prophet Muhammad, once saying, "I'd prefer to die standing than live on my knees."
The Prophet Muhammad is sacred to Muslims, and I can understand that, but for Muslims only. I'm an atheist. Muhammad is not sacred to me. I understand that Muslims don't violate their law of blasphemy, and I don't blame them for not finding our cartoons funny. But they shouldn't tell me under which law I should live.
Also murdered, the magazine's lead cartoonist Jean Cabou, and Georges Wolinski, an 80-year-old satirist who'd been drawing cartoons since the 1960s.
They killed my daddy, but they didn't kill their ideas. They killed men, and that's the way it is. But thanks to all this show of solidarity, thanks to all these people full of love who are rebelling, we're going to be able to do something from it. We're going to be able to fight.
Gradually, the sequence of events became clear. At 11:30, the gunmen arrive at Rue Nicolas Appert in a black Citroën car. Armed with AK-47s and a grenade launcher, they ask maintenance man Frédéric Boisseau for directions to the Charlie Hebdo office before shooting him dead. At the front door, they force cartoonist Corinne Ray and her young daughter to let them in. They make their way to the second floor, where the editor is chairing a meeting. They kill police officer Frank Brinsolaro, who is guarding the editor because of previous threats. The gunman then asks for Stéphane Charbonnier by name and shoot him dead, before killing cartoonists Georges Wolinski, Jean Cabou, Bernard Verlac, and Philippe Honoré, as well as writer Bernard Marie. They also murder columnist Elsa Kayat, sub-editor Mustafa Urad, and Michel Renard, a visitor. 10 other people are also injured. After 5 minutes, the gunmen flee. Around the corner in Allée Verte, they're confronted by police and open fire, leaving a patrol car riddled with bullets on the Boulevard Richard Lenoir. It's after this police officer Ahmed Merabet is wounded and then killed by the gunmen, before they drive off. These are the men suspected of the atrocity. They're two brothers, French nationals of Algerian descent, Sherif and Saïd Kouachi, both reportedly known to the French intelligence services. Sherif appeared in a documentary about extremism a decade ago and was jailed in 2008 for terrorism-related offences.
The French police and French intelligence services knew this group pretty well, not least because both Kouachi brothers had been in prison. The younger one for sending recruits to Iraq to go and fight for al-Qaeda against the American-led occupation. The older for being part of a plot to try to release a known terrorist, an Algerian terrorist who was part of a bombing campaign in the 1980s from prison, a prison breakout. So those two were well known. On top of that, the older one went to the Yemen and actually met with Anwar al-Awlaki. Now he is until he was killed, he was probably the most famous and certainly the most important al-Qaeda leader anywhere in the world, including Osama bin Laden.
As Parisians sought to make sense of the slaughter, their leader spoke.
Mes chers compatriotes, aujourd'hui la France a été attaquée en son cœur.
Today, France has been attacked at its very heart, in Paris, in the building of a paper, and this violent attack killed 12 people and wounded some more.
Je veux ici, en votre nom,
today, in your name, I would like to express our gratefulness to those people who are wounded, to all those who have been killed by this cowardly assassination. Today, they are our heroes.
Freedom of expression can't simply be attacked. State authority can't simply be attacked. Of course, I'm thinking about my brother, but also his colleague who died, and his wife, the wife of my brother, his daughter, his child, and my whole family now.
World leaders joined in the condemnation. It was not just France under attack, they said. It was the principles of democracy and the freedom of expression which were also under threat.
This country stands united with the French people in our opposition to all forms of terrorism, and we stand squarely for free speech and democracy.
To see the kind of cowardly, evil attacks that took place today, I think reinforces once again why it's so important for us to stand in solidarity with them, just as they stand in solidarity with us.
But possibly the strongest message of defiance came from the world's cartoonists, united in grief and galvanized in outrage, their pens proving more powerful than any terrorist weapon.
I did that pitch because it was on a simple pitch. I was able to make something about how to resist and go on and still feeling alive despite what happened. In Charlie Hebdo, there were so many talented cartoonists as Charb, Tenius, and Cabou, and for some people of my generation, these persons were some very great influences.
But as dusk fell around the world, candles were lit and crowds gathered with one message for those who had brought terror to the French capital. Je suis Charlie. The mood of shock and grief was still clear the next day as Paris stood still in defiance against the attack.
I felt compelled to come here today to stand united with Paris and to make them aware that the whole of Europe and the rest of the world are with them on this tragic day.
The human race cannot be stopped by hatred. And I feel for the French people, I really do. Because we felt it in New York, and they'll come back stronger.
But now came the first sign that the attack on Charlie Hebdo might be a part of a larger, overarching plan to bring terror to Paris. A policewoman was shot at a metro station in the south of the capital by a man wearing a bulletproof vest. The attack was at first believed to be unconnected to the Charlie Hebdo shootings. The following day, that was proved to be wrong. The manhunt for the two Charlie Hebdo suspects moved rapidly to this petrol station in the town of Villers-Cotterêts, north of Paris. Two men, matching the gunman's description, fired shots before stealing fuel and food. A Renault Clio stolen by the suspects was found abandoned not far from the petrol station. Armed police scoured woodland and farms with helicopters hovering overhead and police going door to door. It seemed that the hunt was closing in. Darkness fell and the Eiffel Tower dimmed its lights to reflect the mood of its citizens. But day 3 was to see an intensification of the terror. Dawn on day 3 begins with one of the biggest manhunts in France's history. The two brothers wanted for the massacre of at least 12 people remain at large. But to the north of Paris, the search appears to be reaching its final stages as the net closes in. Armoured vehicles stationed outside a forest begin to withdraw. The area has been scoured by police officers following leads on the suspect's whereabouts. Back in the capital, the mood remains defiant. François Hollande's bodyguard publicly displaying a weapon as the president again addresses the nation.
Ses valeurs, ses principes.
France, through its values, through its principles, but also through the state and its civil servants, will be able to resist all sorts of ordeals. I have confidence in you, and I have confidence in my country.
But just 30 miles away, to the northeast of the capital, the drama continues. Reports are now emerging that the suspects have hijacked a vehicle. Police movements responding to rapidly changing information. The convoy speeds along the N2, heading for the nearby industrial town of Dammartin-en-Goële.
Il y a une sortie un peu plus loin. Vous allez passer, vous allez y aller, mais partez s'il vous plaît.
Helicopters overhead provide aerial support as hundreds more armed officers flood the area.
Alors ce matin, ce qui m'a surpris, c'est après avoir déposé ma fille à l'école à 8h30.
This morning, what surprised me was after dropping my daughter at school around 8:30, at 8:45 there was a helicopter hovering over my house. It was very impressive. Knowing this area and what happened yesterday, I thought that something must be happening in our village or nearby.
At this printing factory, reports emerged that one of the brothers, clad in black combat gear and a bulletproof vest, posed as a police officer to bluff his way in. Police negotiators were brought in to talk to the men, but the brothers reportedly told officers that they were preparing to die as martyrs.
Once the police realised that these guys had a hostage inside that Printworks, the dynamic of the incident changes completely, because if you're just going in as special forces, as highly trained special police units, and you've got all the technology with you, you've got the best firearms, the best weaponry, you can isolate room by room and you can close these people down. But once you know there's a hostage in there, once you know that person is in effect a human shield against police action, you have to consider the life and the well-being of that hostage as the primary concern. Time is a critical factor in any negotiation. You know, as time passes, they become tired. The police officers, there's plenty of them, and frankly, they're not going to be tired. They're going to be in shifts. You always want to put fresh officers forward to make sure you've got the best team there. But what you're going to have to do is light these premises. You can't afford to have a stronghold in darkness.
As negotiators dealt with a hostage situation here, news of a second incident in eastern Paris began to emerge. Worst fears that this was turning into a wave of coordinated attacks. As a man armed with a Kalashnikov opened fire in a kosher supermarket. Dozens of vans carrying police in combat gear raced through the streets of central Paris to the scene in Porte de la Vincennes. This is the building with blue-tinted windows, but it was soon becoming clear that it was turning into another hostage situation. At least 6 people being held, among them a woman and a 6-month-old baby.
There was an African individual who had a Kalashnikov. He was reported as being at 23 Avenue Porte de Vincennes. He immediately went into the delicatessen and started shooting with his Kalashnikov. What is for sure is that colleagues who are there have already seen 6 hostages. This individual seems to be the same one from yesterday. He's African and his name is Koulibaly. Sadly, yesterday he already carried out some atrocities by killing a policewoman.
These are the 2 suspects who at the time were believed to be involved in the second siege. 32-year-old Emedi Koulibaly and his partner, 26-year-old Hayat Boumediene. Police believe Koulibaly is also responsible for the shooting of the Paris policewoman Clarissa Jean-Philippe yesterday. French media reporting that the grocery hostage taker was demanding freedom for the Kouachi brothers. Police locked down the area in Porte de la Vincennes. Schools were evacuated, all shops and the streets were told to close, and those in nearby restaurants hid under tables.
We could see a crowd of armed policemen, heavily armed with heavy machine guns and rifles. We heard gunshots. It was like a war scene unfolding in front of our eyes. We heard the gunshots and saw the policemen running. They're still there now, surrounding the main road. They arrived quickly and evacuated people from the area. I live close by. I could see what was happening.
Armed police surrounded the supermarket. It would have been at its busiest at the time as customers prepared for the Shabbat. The French authorities were now facing an unprecedented crisis. 2 separate but linked sieges involving hostages on 2 different sites.
The Al-Qaeda playbook is all about multiple attacks and causing mass casualties. Now, in this case, therefore, once it was clear that these individuals were part of the Al-Qaeda franchise, that they'd been inspired and trained by Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, it should have been assumed that there would be more operations. Following the killings in the magazine and then their departure, and then the information coming from the Yemenis that these people were known to the Yemeni authorities, the French police would have assumed and would have been right that there was going to be another attack, because that's what Al-Qaeda does.
The action, when it came, was direct.
See if we can play that tape back to you. also getting explosions now.
Gunfire and explosions, signalling the storming of the printing works in Damatan-en-Goële. The Kouachi brothers had warned they would not be taken alive. And they were right. Both men shot dead by French commandos. Their hostage found alive. Back in the capital, another assault was being prepared on the Jewish grocery store, but the outcome here would be very different. The store was surrounded, and unknown to the hostage takers, French police had hacked into the shop's CCTV system to monitor their movements. They were also able to talk secretly to one of the hostages inside on a mobile phone, gathering crucial information. Then suddenly the operation was underway. Two teams, each storming a separate entrance. But the direct assault from the front of the building came with risks. A French officer was struck and injured and had to be carried to safety by colleagues. Once inside, the top priority was to rescue the hostages. Some ran out, frightened and disorientated. But not all. At least 4 bodies are recovered inside, and 3 of them are known to be hostages. The 4th is yet to be identified. One of the gunmen, Ahmed Koulibaly, has been shot dead, but contradicting previous police accounts, his girlfriend Hayat Boumediene is not inside. It's now thought another, unidentified gunman has escaped.
I would like to pay homage to the courage of the policemen. I am proud of what they have done. When the order was given, they carried the assault with the result that was expected. And they did that to save human lives and to neutralize the terrorists.
3 days of terror have paralyzed France. The authorities will say the attackers were identified quickly, tracked, and shot dead. But they will also have to admit that these men were known to the police, as were their links to international terror groups. Hostages have been killed, and a terrorist has evaded capture. And it's not known how many others were involved in the planning and execution of the carnage.
I think the French police are going to be dismayed with the loss of 4 hostages in the Paris operation. I think they're also going to be asking some very serious questions as to why the 2 rescue operations were not launched simultaneously. The hostage taker in the Paris deli had said, "I will kill these hostages if you launch an operation against my friends, the Kouachi brothers." Now, that operation against the Kouachi brothers went off about 10 to 15 minutes before the attack went in against the hostage takers in the deli. Now, they had surveillance, we understand, inside the deli. The police had hacked into the CCTV inside that building. They may have also been in communication with a hostage taker, and they would have wanted to go absolutely simultaneously. There's some evidence that they may have delayed it because they needed the TV cameras around them to switch off the live feed before they could go in. And if that's the case, there's going to be a serious controversy and a lot of anger in France.
An attack on a small magazine escalated into an unprecedented manhunt and turned the French capital into a war zone. The immediate threat has been dealt with, and France breathes again. But she does so with shallow breaths.